So I'm Larry Gindorf with the Morris County Municipal Utilities Authority. And so first of all, I just want to welcome everyone. I appreciate everyone who did make it to this Municipal Recycling Coordinators meeting on this beautiful morning. So we're going to have several speakers here, a few from the Morris County MUA, then followed by Eric Gabrielson from Republic Services, talking about some issues at his recycling facility in Mine Hill, and then followed by Gary Sondermeyer from Bayshore Recycling, who's going to talk about some of the prospects related to food recycling and not wasting food here in New Jersey. I've had to hand this meeting over to Liz Sweetie, our Municipal Recycling Coordinator here at the Morris County MUA. So give me just a quick second. I'm going to hand this meeting over to Liz.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on this beautiful first day of autumn. This meeting will count as 1.5 classroom credits, and it will also meet the municipal tonnage grant requirement as well. So I was going to speak about the state budget and the reallocation of $12 million from the recycling money and $10 million from Clean Communities. We just received word that the proposed budget does not contain the language to reallocate this money. As a result of your hard work, thank you all.
Hold on one second.
So as I was saying, that we just received word that the proposed budget does not contain the language to reallocate the money. And we thank you for your hard work with reaching out to legislators and just trying to get the word out and asking for their support. I guess it really did work out. So we have some really great speakers, as Larry mentioned, and our first speaker this morning is our very own Deirdre Gallagher, and she's going to be talking about household hazardous waste.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Deirdre Gallagher, and I am here to speak about the Household Hazardous Waste Permanent Facility. Most of you are familiar with our drop-off events. Many of you probably are aware of our permanent facility. For those of you who are not, we maintain a permanent facility located in Mount Olive, and we see just about residents from just about every single one of your municipalities. So at the facility, we accept all of that nasty material everyone has in their garages or basements or underneath their kitchen sinks. We are available on, 3 mornings a week, Tuesday, Friday, Saturday mornings generally. Residents are required to make an appointment, and they do so online. So this is our homepage, schedule HHW appointments. Everyone clicks on that. The first thing they see, of course, is the image of our facility. So they have a pretty good idea where they're going. And on that page, we have tried to list the current updates with respect to our facility. Residents then go down and hit the appropriate box. Residential household hazardous waste generated within Morris County, and a calendar appears with the highlighted dates indicating available appointments. They choose that. So people get to schedule their own appointments online. Once they hit a time, a form opens, which we request that they complete with some pretty good detail. As you can see, we ask them to provide their email address. They receive a confirmation email. We ask them a series of questions, as well as the material that they will be bringing. One of the important things about that is we need to know what they are bringing. Oftentimes people confuse hazardous material with non-hazardous material. So All of these materials that you can see here are materials that we accept at the facility. Car batteries, rechargeable batteries, fluorescent light bulbs, and all, as I mentioned at the outset, all of the nasty material that we all have located in various nooks and corners of our home. Alrighty, so we also accept electronics. As we all are aware, there are 6 mandated items required to be recycled: televisions, computers, monitors, tablets, laptops, desktop printers, and faxes. Please do remind everyone, do not put these items in the trash. Speaking of trash, however, all the peripheral items, the keyboards, the cables, etc., we do not take up at the facility, and those can go in the trash. All right, so we accept all that material. For those of you who have residents in the eastern part of Morris County, when your residents do submit the forms, and if all they're bringing to the facility are electronics, I will pick up the phone or send them an email and advise them of locations closer to them so that there's no need to go from, say, Montville all the way out to Flanders. So we do try to help the residents dispose of the material properly closer to them. More acceptable material, all of your gardening material, your fertilizers, your small propane tanks, the canisters, for camping, etc., mercury thermometer and devices, and your stains, your lacquers, all your aerosol products, and your motor oil, etc. One word of advice: anything liquid brought to the facility must be in containers 5 gallons or smaller. We do not accept anything in containers larger than 5 gallons. More specifically, we don't take anything in a drum. Every once in a while, we receive phone calls for that, and the answer to that is no. Okay. So, unacceptable materials. We don't take anything with Freon. If the forms come in or questions come in regarding air conditioning units, refrigerators, etc., we do our best to find a location near your resident where they can take the Freon appliance to a facility that manages Freon. Smoke detectors, another big item we generally receive a lot of questions on. Those typically go back to the manufacturer. Sharps, again, another question that we receive often, and those we have that information as well available for the residents. Helium tanks we do not accept. We also have a flyer that if a question comes in, I will send a flyer to the residents advising them how to dispose of those type of materials. No, not that one. Okay. So, the questions that we often receive that create some difficulty are with empty containers. We're not concerned specifically with the containers. It is the material. So empty containers, we discourage people from bringing those empty containers. There's no reason for anyone to waste their gas coming up to our facility with empty containers. Those would be just thrown in the garbage. Paint is a specific question. Oil-based versus the latex. Oil-based is the hazardous material. Latex or water-based paint certainly is non-hazardous. We now are accepting the latex paint at our facility, but we do charge $1.50 a pound. A gallon of latex paint, it could weigh 8.35 pounds, cost your resident approximately $13 to dispose. We generally recommend that they dispose of it by drying it out, air drying. That will take a long time. We recommend the kitty litter method, and we have a flyer available for your residents for that as well. I think that is about it. We do also accept the hazardous waste from qualified small businesses. Qualified small businesses are those businesses with fewer than 50 employees. Those businesses must call for an appointment. They cannot schedule it currently online themselves. They are also required to complete a very small quantity generator form in order to have an appointment scheduled. Appointments, when your resident comes up to the facility, they literally are in and out of the facility 5 to 10 minutes. It is a very quick process. They never get out of the car. We remove all the material for them, including the heavy electronics. We have our contractor available to do all of that. And I'm trying to think if there are any other questions specifically with regard to the household hazardous waste. But as I say, most people have all of that. I'm going to rattle off a few other things: nail polish remover, cooking oil, all of your aerosol cans. So most of the things that maybe people are not aware is hazardous, but if you advise them, things that you know don't go down the drain, do not get into the environment safely, we will accept. If they have any questions at all, please have them give us a call and we will answer those questions. Kitty litter, by the way, is only for the paint. I did have a call this morning where one resident was advised to put kitty litter into diesel fuel. Please don't do that. That is not acceptable. That is not the proper method to dispose of the diesel fuel. If you have any resident that is also converting from an underground tank, we take the sludge oil. We also provide receipts so that your resident can indeed advise the municipality that they have done that and disposed of the sludge oil properly. So if anyone has any questions, I'll be glad to answer those. So, all righty. Well, thank you guys for listening. Appreciate it. And besides, if anyone has any questions, feel free to give me a buzz. And I'll be glad to help. As I say, if you know. And the other thing too, one other thing, if you guys are aware of any other resource for your residents in the area that perhaps I could relay to some of the residents when they call in, that'd really help. A lot of times, people look for resources such as used motor oil. I know AutoZones had been taking them. I've been hearing anecdotally that some are no longer after COVID, but if you're aware of any of those other resources, that'd be great, because we really do like to help the residents get rid of their material closer to them to make it easy. And as an aside, one of the things I really love when people complain about having to drive all the way up to Flanders, I tell them we're one of only 3 permanent facilities throughout the state. The other is in Monmouth County, and the last is in Burlington. So we're a lot closer than people think we are. So that's it. And for now, I'm going to turn this over to Eric Gabrielson of Republic Services.
Oh. Hi guys, can you hear me and see me? First, let me say good morning, and I miss you guys all coming by the facility for a tour very much. It's been great seeing you in 2019, and without you guys coming through, I feel a little disconnected from everybody. But I'm pretty connected to your trucks, so as long as they keep coming, at least we got that, right? It's good to be in front of you all, even though I can't see you and say hello and shake your hands. So it's been anything but a normal year, between staying at home and the pandemic, and certainly the hazmats that we received. But Liz asked me to present about things that are fire hazards in the facility, and I'll touch on that a lot. I'll touch on a little bit about, what's going on in recycling as we see it, because I always like to bring you guys that information. And I like getting your feedback too with whatever you're seeing and hearing out there. So anyway, not a normal year, not something we expected, but getting into things with what we do here at the facility in terms of hazmats. We see this is perfect. Deirdre's presentation dovetails into this one really well. I took a few notes, and so many of the items that she was pointing out are items that we see here on a fairly regular basis, really every day. She mentioned electronic devices and batteries and camping propane. One of the newest ones in 2020 we've got, and I don't remember seeing this in previous years, is the 40-to-1 oil mix that you can get at pretty much any hardware store. So it's a tin, and we market tin out of here. And that's one of the ones that's been kind of an interesting one, because when we market for tin, it's, your spaghetti sauce, your soup can, your olive oil can, the things that come from your kitchen, not necessarily your garage. So most of you guys who are out following your routes, I'm sure you see items like this. We get plenty of the other things that she mentioned too, the paint products. If I tried to get every aerosol can out of our stream, I'd need 20 more sorters probably to do that. So, they go through. And I don't really think it's usually an aerosol can that ever starts a fire here, but we do get them. And the fires that we get, they happen in various parts of our facility, but as it pertains to our composition and what comes through the door, we got two places where they occur. The tip floor, where materials coming out of trucks and loaders are scraping against the ground and things are getting lifted and dropped, etc. That tends to be an issue. I think that's more where our batteries catch fire. And the second place is where if you have to have a fire, I suppose it's the best place is in a baler, because a baler is very contained. It's still a pretty scary event, but at least you don't have a fire spreading rapidly to materials that are in your building. And that's when we get the, something like a camping propane tank that is half empty and it gets pressurized from the baler, cylinders closing on it, and next thing you know, there's a spark, there's heat, there's fuel, there's oxygen, and you get a bang. So those are the two most popular places you'll see a fire. So touching on some of those items, I got some footage, which I'll admit to being guilty. I showed some of these pictures in a presentation last year, but they kind of hit home because, this is one that came straight from a fire and you got the ABC spray on it. That was like a cordless drill battery. Laptop battery that caught fire. This one went up our pre-sort belt and actually made it out of the tip floor. I'm not sure if that's a lithium ion, but it's some type of a very small battery, a little bit bigger than my thumbnail. This is an interesting one. I got this last week, and this was emailed to me from my scrap metal guy. This got all the way into the scrap metal container and caught fire at his facility. And, we get that between scrap, but we get it more with our waste guy. When he opens up a bale of something, he'll say, yeah, it started smoking and we found a battery. So batteries tend to be hard to find. These things are very small. They go through our system. And, you can't see something the size of a quarter going across the belts. So big part of the problem with our composition is if it's going across our belt and it's that small, it's going to get into a bale somewhere, and most likely into a bale and hurt one of our guys downstream. This is a new one we didn't see until last winter. We had somebody's hand warmer that they threw in their recycling catch fire. Larry, I see you and Liz talking. Are we okay technically? Okay. Whoops, that was a duplicate. Okay, so this is the highest frequency where we have fires. And I threw a picture in here. That's an explosion that happened in our baler last fall. That was one of the best pictures I got of it because you can see the fire coming out in various different places of the baler. And you see the baler operator, he's standing 3 feet away from it. Tremendously scary episodes, because you're not necessarily expecting them. They can happen, but we put into some places some safeguards in addition to what we did previously. We highly educated all our pre-sort guys to pull out anything. We gave them a lot of pictures. We gave them a lot of examples, and this has helped us. And we've done some other things where we're pulling materials off the baler belt before they go into a bale, and that's been a big help too. So the good news you do have, this is a scary issue. It's something that we really should address. But the good news is we were able to reduce fires a lot this year. Probably by this time last year, I'd had half a dozen anyway. And it was happening almost on a weekly basis when we baled our tin. And we've had one tin fire that I know of this year. So that's been a significant reduction. And the guy you see in the picture is the happiest because, it's his job. So, but I'm pretty happy about it too. That's not to say we don't still get a lot of material. So these are the items, and Deirdre showed some nice looking pictures of brand new, but this is what they look like coming through our facility. Sometimes they have caps on them. That's the scary time because you don't know if there's material that was still in there when they threw them out. Sometimes the caps are off, sometimes they're flat, sometimes they're almost perfect condition. One or two times you'll see them come out and there's material dripping out of them. So what we're doing, that's the blowtorch. There's the camping container that Deirdre had pointed out. And by far the leader of the pack, since we've been looking at these, is that 40-to-1 mix. The nice thing is it's easy to see. So that's what we're doing. That's a picture of my operations supervisor. I don't know if you can see the pole in his hand, but he's got an aluminum pole that's about 8 feet long. And at the end of it, there's a red, probably a 40-to-1 fuel can that he's holding up. I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but it's down there. As I put in the note down here, we started this in June after we had a baler fire, and we're pulling out 20 or so items a day that are flammables. And we're going to really review the effectiveness about how this has worked, but we've shown some improvement, which is nice. So the impact that this has to us, and it has to everybody that's associated with us, it's both a safety issue and a cost issue. Anything, the third point there is damaged equipment. Damaged equipment costs money. It creates downtime. That costs money because diverted materials are very expensive for all of us. Most important, top of the list is safety. Nobody ever wants to see anybody get hurt. And we are, as we all know, in a very dangerous business. So this is something that we looked at as an unnecessary risk, and we're doing everything we can to mitigate it. And, I'm happy to tell you it's improved. So, Liz and I talked quite a bit in late spring about putting together an education campaign, which I think that Liz, we really, I've been pretty busy with some other issues inside the plant and some big maintenance projects, but I think that we really would benefit from educating people and into what goes into the recycling. Even if it's tin per se, it may not be something you want to put in a recycling truck. And that, as much as it could be an issue for me here, it could also mean a hot load in a truck bringing materials to me. And now that we're Republic for a few years, I've been on more than my share of phone calls where I have to hear a safety account of how somebody handled a hot load. And it's every bit as scary as a MRF fire, I think. So, Liz, let's not, I'll pick up the trail. How about that, Liz? Now that I've got some things in my rear view mirror, we can get together with that. But, this, one of the things that Deirdre said was so perfect. Make it easy, and I think that we can. I think we should. In her words, I heard them real loud and clear when she said, make it easy for the residents. So I'm really glad when I see, the household hazardous waste being made available and whatever, taking the oils and taking the paints and everything else that we do, because we need it. And we need to inform the guys about it who are working with us. So anyway, I want to give you a little story. This was the scariest day of my life here at the MRF since I've been here. It's about 6:15 at night, and my two techs are closing up for the night, and that's a picture of my tipped floor. And, I got a message from Kathy Horahan that came up and went away, and I didn't get to read it. So if you want to ask that again, Kathy, I'll entertain it. Or if I can get it at the end of the presentation, that's good too. Anyway, I get a call. I'm at my house at 6:15. My family's sitting down for dinner, and I get a call from a tech saying, I think we have a fire on the tip floor, Eric. So I told him to get the hose, to get the other tech, start pulling material out of the tip floor, and I called the fire department. And by about 6:35, when I arrived to the facility, that's the scene that we had outside. And I wanted to expand this picture so you could see it better, but it didn't fit on my slide. And I don't know if you can see it too well here, but there was a huge vein of material out here where the fire came from. My techs reacted very, very quickly. One of them got in the loader and removed material out of the facility, which I think pretty much saved our facility. The other one started spraying the area with a hose until the fire department came. I'm showing you this because it's very real. And, Gary Sondermeyer is here today. He can attest to it. It's the scariest outcome in a MRF ever. So it's really near and dear to my heart. I mean, this place has got 200 tons of flammables on it every day coming into it. So I gave a major thank you to the Mine Hill Fire Department. They were up here so fast and kept us safe. And at the end of the day, we got this close to finding what the material was. We never found exactly what it was. From what the fire marshal and the fire chief and I could see, it looked like a battery. And it looked like it had to be a battery, only because we couldn't tell. No gas smells, no paint thinner smells. There was no big container of something. It was just something small that got into the material. It got moved the wrong way. The next thing you know, there's a reaction and we have a fire on our hands. So I wanted to point out the heroes of that day. That's my two techs, Daniel and Andy. Like I say, right guys in the right place at the right time. And, that's life at a MRF, dealing with difficult, hazardous materials, flammables. And I know that there's one question, but before we get to that, hey, Kathy, did you want to put that question back up? I don't know if you can hear me or not. Anyway, how we're handling things. For us, it's education, big time, everywhere else through the plant. I have 9 different pre-sorters who I work with to really let them know what we're seeing and really keep them, make the flammables their number one priority. 2 folks watching the baler belt when we bale tin, because that's the main culprit. And of course, we can't train our tip floor guys enough. Well, ever since the calendar flipped to 2020, it's been a very challenging year. We saw paper values go to negative in mixed paper as we started off the calendar year. And what that caused was a backlog like anything we've ever seen, like nothing we've ever seen. And, we had bales coming, everywhere in our facility. You couldn't move paper for the first week or 2 of the year. And it was really, really a slow go with paper. And, the good thing is that's cyclical to a point. I'm not going to speak on paper markets full time, but it eased up and prices have been going up throughout the year on paper and on cardboard ever since. But for a good 2 to 3 weeks, moving material out of here was very difficult, to the point we actually warehoused some material elsewhere for a couple of weeks. And then, as you know, came the COVID-19 situation. And only wanted to bring it up just because it's been a lot of stress. It's been a lot of hassle for everybody. And we didn't escape any of that. We had about 2 weeks where we had about 45% to 50% absentee between people who were affected through exposure, through diagnosis. Some took early retirement who were working here and just didn't want to be in that environment. So, it's been a difficult year with that, but we've seen some really interesting things at the MRF. First, I got a great team that works here, and after the initial hit, we came together really well, and we've handled what's been a year where tons. Okay, here's Kathy's. The reduction in fires this year was, Kathy, that thing goes way too quickly, but you're asking about the reduction in fires this year. I'll finish this slide, then I'll get to that. So stay at home changed recycling. big time on the residential side, and it changed it big time on the commercial side. Commercial tons in the spring went drastically down as businesses were shut down. But what we saw coming out of the homes was, and this is good for all of us, a lot more cardboard. Amazon has never been busier. I think we'd all attest to that. We've been getting more cardboard come through here. It made things difficult to process because cardboard is big and light. It's got a nice value, so that's the benefit to it. But it's really changed how we approach materials, and we're doing everything we can to remove cardboard before it gets into the infeed here, which just drastically helps our ability to run. The other big, the big bonus that we've got was aluminum. I guess when people stay home, they drink a lot more canned beer or something, because we have, I'd say we probably doubled our output of aluminum cans, water, whatever it is, soda, beer. But, we've seen things not evolve. It's been a revolution, not an evolution in the way that materials have come through here. I remember watching Bob Anderson at an Angier event or an MUA talk tell everybody that cardboard probably wouldn't eclipse paper, but none of us saw this coming. And this year we've seen cardboard tonnage-wise eclipse paper. So the composition that's coming through the facility is to our benefit. It's a good thing. The aluminum that we've got come through here has helped us, and we've seen the costs involved with recycling start to drop a little bit, which is great. We've also seen from the towns that we've got, it feels like, and I'm not going to give examples, it feels like every town that we have, their tonnage is increased as well. So I know you guys are dealing with it out on the streets the same way we are here. It's been big, and it's been, you get your really big days. So we're here to help you with everything that you get, and we appreciate you sending it to us. And the last thing I just want to bring up is with stay-at-home orders, with everything else, a lot of things have opened back up, but we have seen trucking on every side of the business. Republic's driver force, it's hard to find drivers. Outbound trucks with finished goods are hard to get. I think we felt it a little bit everywhere with trucking, but that issue's not gone away, so we'll see how that ends. The last thing I wanted to tell you is, in the fall of 19, I was letting people know that we had a good team that was really come together, and we've been together now, this team that as it's constituted, for about a year, and this MRF is running really well. We've had a hiccup or two along the way, but this MRF, compared to where it was 2 years ago and even last fall, we've gotten so much better, and we appreciate all of your patience. We appreciate, being able to work with you, and we certainly appreciate the education that you guys have been given, because it starts with product coming inbound, and you guys who are involved with us, you do such a good job educating, so I want to thank you for that. Now, Kathy had a question about the reduction in fires.
Hey, Eric. Larry here. I see Kathy's question. It says, hi, Eric. Good to see you. Would you say the reduction in fires this year is due to extra QC on the tin baler line, or to some other different behavior from residents? Additionally, does COVID change in behavior have anything to do with it?
Well, to the first side of it, I think we did a better job of pulling materials starting last fall with education and our sorters. It's hard for me to tell you that there's a reduction or an increase in materials that are flammable that come through our facility in terms of, was it more in 2019 all of a sudden? I don't really know that. And we started really going and picking materials off the baler belt in the spring of this year.
I mean, I do know
everybody's done across the way helps it.
I do know our hazardous waste quantities per person seem to have been going up over time. So maybe there's just more material available.
I just don't have a baseline. And, the last fall, it was camping propane. We saw so many of those green containers come through. This year, camping is down. You can't go to a campground unless you have a self-contained camper. And people with self-contained campers probably aren't using those Coleman propane stoves. They probably have, I don't have a self-contained camper, but I don't think that they're using those little tanks. So that might be some of it. Operationally, you have blades in a baler, and we changed our blades late last fall. It's pretty coincidental. When you change blades and you make them a little sharper, you probably get a better shear on your metals, and that may cause less sparks inside a baler chamber. So that's probably a part of it. I can't say it is. It's anecdotal to me. But there's a lot of little things that happen, but I can tell you, anytime you get something off the belt that's hazardous, it certainly doesn't hurt us. But I think everything along the line has helped,
Well, thanks so much, Eric. Your presentation was very informative, and I look forward to working with you on some education coming
We'll
up
get to it.
soon. Coming up soon, I hope.
Yes.
Thanks so much. And I think that, Larry, will you mute Eric now, or?
Yeah, I'm going to turn Gary.
Right?
Yes. So now, next, we welcome Gary Sondermeyer from Bayshore. Great. Hi, Gary.
Hi, good morning, Liz. How you doing?
Good morning. Good. Thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
I'd like to introduce Gary Sondermeyer. Gary Sondermeyer has been a person who's been throughout all of the solid waste and recycling challenges and wars of New Jersey for as long as I've been around New Jersey, which has been about 35 years. So Gary currently works for Bayshore Recycling in Keesby, New Jersey, down by the Outer Bridge Crossing, a very major recycling facility. And he's certainly a person who's been around the state doing great stuff for the whole world of solid waste. And for the most part, Gary's going to be talking to us a lot about food waste right here. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Gary, and I appreciate you being here.
Certainly my pleasure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And you can see my PowerPoint.
Yes.
Yes, perfect.
It is a happy day. All right. Well, thank you to Larry, to Liz, to Chris for the opportunity to speak with you. And thank you, all the municipal recycling coordinators, for what you do. Without question, you're the heart and the soul and the engine that make recycling run in the state of New Jersey. So thank you. Terrific news to start this webinar about the recycling fund. We worked very hard at Anger on that issue. I got to testify in the Senate last week to make a pitch, not to take our money, and collectively as a community, we were heard. And I just hope it all goes through, and it's very exciting. What a sigh of relief, right? I also want to compliment Eric on a great presentation. And Eric, you're absolutely right. Fires are the bane of a MRF's existence. And we're very active in our national association, and lithium batteries in particular are really a problem. And Bayshore, we've had 2 devastating fires, which many of you probably know. So I'm going to talk about food waste today. And it's sort of like the new frontier, and something we really haven't focused a great deal of attention in our 33 or 34 years of mandatory recycling. But now is the time, and it's very, very exciting. I just have 5 slides that I'd like to go through quickly, and please, I'd love to answer any questions that you have. We'll focus in particular on the food waste recycling landfill ban, or disposal ban that was passed and signed into law by the governor in April. But I also want to sort of give you as broad a understanding or exposure to different things that are happening. Again, it is a very, very exciting time. We had our first major piece of legislation back in July of 2017, which was S3027, which is the New Jersey Food Waste Reduction Act. And the state adopted a goal of a 50% reduction in food waste by 2030. Obviously, this is, you talk about a hierarchy of waste management and recycling. This is right at the top. We're talking about feeding hungry people. And the metrics are truly unbelievable. New Jersey is the 2nd most affluent state in the United States of America, only behind Maryland in terms of family income. and yet 11% of New Jerseyans are underserved for food, and 15% for kids that are 18 and under. So it's really a disgrace, something we have to work on. So the legislature did pass our food waste law and mandated DEP to come up with an implementation plan. And this was tough. This is new ground for DEP. This is not an area that they spent historic time on. The plan was supposed to come out in a year. It came out a little late, but that's okay. Better late than never. And the draft was released by DEP in August of 2019. I think it's very good. And in this slide, these green links that you see, if you cut and paste them, you can find the Source Reduction Act. You can find the DEP Food Waste Reduction Plan. It is a sector-based approach. And again, it's tough because this is a whole new world for DEP as a regulatory agency. We're talking about soup kitchens and food banks and churches and organizations that kind of connect the dots between donors of food, who would be restaurants, supermarkets, and so forth, with folks who need the food. And so it's a big deal. And a lot of it's going to be web-based. The plan, the DEP had 3 regional public hearings. I had a chance to testify on behalf of the Association of New Jersey Recyclers. And we were very supportive. And the plan hasn't been finalized yet. And I think that's largely due to COVID. You know, it's very hard to get attention and up through a chain of command. But the plan is good, and it's going to be a very good beginning for us. The Food Waste Reduction Act, again, signed by the governor in April. If you want to find it, you can just hit this link. This was really interesting. It's the bad joke with legislation is people say it's like making sausage. In this case, it was like making scrapple, or something lower than sausage in terms of additives. I had a chance to draft the legislation on behalf of ANGER and submit it to the Office of Legislative Services, and it took 5.5 years to get it through the legislature. And I could spend the whole time I have just talking about the war stories of on again, off again, and just some crazy stuff. But the somewhat of the irony of it is what was ultimately passed was very similar to what we submitted to the Office of Legislative Services 5.5 years ago. So that's good. So it's good, even though it was tough. And that's what public policy is. You're supposed to debate stuff, and the good news is we got it through. Other important food reduction and recycling developments. Very interesting flurry of activity in May of 2019. And there were actually 7, I'll call them small, minor bills signed by Governor Murphy. And like, for instance, one of them you may have experienced last week. I know Steve Rinaldi and DEP hosted a food waste reduction day, and they had a webinar, and that actually was from a statute, from a bill that was passed to create a food waste reduction day. One I'd just like to point out is A4705 created a New Jersey food waste task force to really focus on this. Unfortunately, and again, I think it's COVID-based, the task force has not been named by the governor's office. And somewhat interestingly, the administrative agency that's supposed to administer that task force is Human Services. You know, we always think of DEP as doing this stuff, or maybe the Department of Health, but it's actually Human Services. So hopefully that group will be formed. If you haven't followed it, DEP also came out with absolutely outstanding school food waste guidelines that deal with reduction, donation, and recycling. And they created their own food waste website. So if you go to the website, which I'm sure every one of you have done in the past, of the Division of Solid and Hazardous Waste at DEP, if you hit the Recycling in New Jersey button, and I included it here, you'll get to the food waste website. It's very comprehensive and very good. So, you know, what are we talking about with food? Obviously, we've had mandatory recycling for 33, 34 years now. Back in the good old days, as Larry mentioned, I'm old, so I've been doing this stuff for 40 years. And in the beginning of the planning process, every county did a composition and characterization study to find out what's in the waste stream, how much stuff do we generate, and they were great. But then we built a bunch of stuff, And after you build all the facilities, why do a composition study? So no one did any for a long time. The Mercer County Improvement Authority did one about 3 or 4 years ago. And it kind of bore out what the national statistics are. Food waste is the largest component that's left in the waste stream after 33 years of mandatory recycling. Round numbers, 25%. In DEP's food waste reduction plan, they did some detailed calculations. They came up with 23%. It's about a quarter of it. So it is like the biggest chunk to go after. The food waste recycling law, we certainly didn't reinvent any wheels. And we are about in New Jersey, which is unusual for us to say because we've been such a leader in recycling. On the food waste end, we're about 5 years behind our brother and sister New England states of Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, Rhode Island, New York City as a program, Philadelphia as a program. We actually modeled ours off of Connecticut. And the difference in these states, and it's kind of funny, somebody came up with a metric. And the metric initially was 2 tons generated per year would be the definition of a major generator. And the only difference in these laws is how quickly you ratchet that number down. So the big winner in terms of getting to sustainability is actually the state of Vermont. In their statute, the number gets cut in half of who's covered every year. So they started at 104 tons, 2 ton, 104 per year, or 2 tons per week, down to 52, down to 26, down to 13, down to curbside. But Vermont has less people than Bergen, Middlesex, and Monmouth counties individually in New Jersey. So they're a very small state. They have a lot of farming, cow farms, and a lot of digesters already in place. So in their case, they could do that, but that's not in our case. For our statute that was passed, large generators, and I'll pause. This was actually one significant change from when we originally proposed this 5.5 years ago through Anger. We started at 104 tons per year generation to be a covered generator, and because it took so long to get it through the legislature, the sponsor, Senator Bob Smith, just re-proposed it to start at 52. Ours, after 3 years, went to 52. So if you generate 52 tons per year, or a ton a week, and you are within 25 road miles of a food waste facility. And this is important, the transportation cost differential. Let's say you're in Morristown, and Trenton Biogas, which is an operating facility, is in Trenton. That's really probably too far to go for a reasonable transportation cost for it not to hurt the generator. So we built in, as all the other New England states did as well, a mileage metric. Ours is a little shorter than some of the states at 25 road miles. And then a third criteria we built in is unique to New Jersey's statute, which is really a cost differential. And the way this came out in final legislation is a little bit confusing. But so here's the point. If you generate a ton a week of food waste and there's a facility within 25 miles, road miles, you have to go there, provided it doesn't cost you more than 10% of what you're currently paying for transportation and disposal. Hopefully you could follow that. The way we wrote it originally was it couldn't cost you more. And then somehow in the public policy comment process, this 10% criteria came in, which we actually opposed at Anger, because we just think it makes it more confusing for DEP to try to administer the law. But the whole point of this is we didn't want generators to be hurt by this legislation. So in particular, your supermarket, we all go to the supermarket, they don't operate on a huge margin. And we didn't want a recycling law to negatively impact the operations of the supermarket. So we built in a criteria where it couldn't cost them more. And we've had really good testimony from food waste generators, like Wakeford and other large food companies say that this legislation absolutely will save supermarkets and food waste generators money. And that's a really good thing. DEP has a lot to do with this legislation. They have to put together rules and regulations as needed. They have to put together record keeping and reporting obligations of generators. You know, like we know, we all live recycling. You know, enforcement is soft. It just is. You know, it's hard to enforce recycling, and this is no different. And DEP at least has to come up with sort of the game plan, the guidebook of record keeping and reporting. So there can be some checks and balances, and there are soft enforcement provisions in the statute. So if a generator doesn't comply, they can get whacked, they can get a ticket. And that's important to keep sort of the legitimacy of the program. DEP also has to come out with guidelines on calculating generation. You know, again, that metric of 52 tons per year, what does that really mean to a generator? Do they really look at this? Do they really track this? And the last one is a list of what food waste products to recycle and operating standards. The really good news about this, and this is sort of, I guess, the benefit of being a little late to the game, being 5 years behind the New England states, all this stuff's been done already. It's been done. There's a Center for Eco Technology out of Massachusetts. That's a nonprofit organization that has done phenomenal work. Harvard University has led the nation in food waste calculation for reduction, for recycling. So again, DEP, when they wrote their plan, they had a lot of resources to pull from, and we just have to apply these resources and tailor them to New Jersey. So, you know, I'm very confident we can do this as a state really well. The statute also creates a food waste market development council. And I know this gets a little bit confusing. I mentioned there was another statute that put together a food waste task force. In my mind, they are very, very different things. The food waste task force is sort of to try to look at the food waste issue globally and come up with recommendations. As we know, in recycling, you know, those chasing arrows, you know, that the hardest one of those arrows is the market, right? You got to have market development. So this is intended to have people who really understand composting and the economics of composting to get involved, to come up with recommendations. Again, unfortunately, no work has been done to name these council members yet. I will tell you, as your Association of Recyclers, we came up with a list of, there's 6 members on the thing. We came up with our list and submitted them to the governor's office in a week to try to move this along. And unfortunately, because of COVID, which we can all appreciate and understand, there hasn't been any movement on that as yet. There are procurement requirements for state agencies. And this is something that I actually pulled from an executive order that was put in place by Governor Jim Florio in 1993, which is Executive Order 99 on state agency procurement. And this is significant. Any like Department of Transportation, any other state agency that's purchasing compost, if they purchase an organic-based product that comes from food waste or other organic materials, so it doesn't have the chemicals in it, there's a 10% price preference. So the Department of Treasury, which buys all this stuff on behalf of the state, would have to buy the organic product as long as it's not more than 10%. And there's even discretion that we built in to go up to 15%. So I think that's significant. That's the kind of stuff that we need to try to drive markets for a compost product. And finally, there's a 50-cent per ton host community benefit that's authorized. And this was hotly debated because we haven't had host benefits for any recycling facilities in the past. And we really thought that for food waste facilities, towns should be eligible to get a host community benefit if they'd be willing to step up to the plate through the county planning process to site facilities. So who generates the food? And this is some composition numbers from the Natural Resource Defense Council. About half, round numbers, 43% residential, 26%, roughly a quarter restaurants, 14% supermarkets, 9% institutions like hospitals, prisons, and schools, and 8% food manufacturers and processors. And I mentioned the DEP structured their food waste reduction plan as a sector-based approach. It's kind of like this, to focus on sectors, because stimulating the recycling and reduction of food is a sector-based issue. It's different depending on obviously a residential situation versus a restaurant or a supermarket. So DEP, and I'm sorry, this gets a little bit confusing. In 2014, when we first, as Andrew, were trying to develop legislation, DEP hired a summer intern. And the young lady did a terrific job using GIS tools and some information from the Department of Labor. And she put together kind of like a snapshot, a generator report. Like, you know, who would be covered under a law like this? And I present it because it's the only information on generation we have. And it was based on the old number, which was 104 ton per year or 2 ton per week generation. The statute was implemented at 52. So the point of this is it's a lot more than what is on this slide, but this is the only information we have. And even from this, I think it's interesting just to have, you know, because we don't know, like how many of this and that, we don't know, right? So roughly 500 grocery stores, 420 restaurants. We have 53 operating hospitals still in New Jersey. 12 nursing homes would be large enough to generate that kind of food. Believe it or not, we have 45 colleges and universities in New Jersey that would be covered, 23 prisons, almost 900 food manufacturers, 760 food wholesalers, 130 event venues, 61 hotels and motels, and roughly 50 resorts and casinos. In a prior webinar some months ago, a regional manager for Wake Firm spoke, and he said, boy, a ton a week is not a lot of food for anybody that has anything to do with food. So the point is, we're going to have a lot of entities covered under this law, and it could be very, very significant. And the whole point of legislation, and I'm going to touch on this in my last slide, we don't have much infrastructure in New Jersey. And we all know that, you know that. You know, the things that we had going back, you know, younger days for me when I was in the solid waste program were outdoor operations, and most of them unfortunately failed. And we had some high technology aerobic and anaerobic digestion technologies that also failed. Food waste is a tough business. But the whole point of the legislation was, remember good old flow control, right? Flow control was put in place so you'd have a guaranteed feedstock of material, which is guaranteed revenue to pay off your debt, right? Same concept here. This disposal ban legislation, in essence, creates a waste flow, right? If you're a generator, you're a large generator, and there's a place you can go within 25 miles that's not going to cost you more, you have to go there. So the hardest thing in developing facilities of any kind, and certainly Larry, Liz know this, Chris, from what work you've done in the county, is financing. The hardest part is financing, getting a bank to finance you. And when you have a guaranteed flow of material and tipping fees and feedstock, banks are a lot more willing to finance projects. So the whole point of this, in a phrase, is legislature. If you pass the legislation, they will build it. And they will build it very much private or public sector. Is never intended just for the private sector. We'd love to see, through Andrew, public facilities step up and get built as well. So just a few other things. Am I okay on time? Okay, good. Just a few other things to mention, excuse me, is the Composting Council did a petition for rulemaking to the DEP on community gardens. There's a lot of things, unfortunately, and let me just stop and sort of explain this. In my earlier days at DEP, when I first started in the late 70s, we had 630 landfills, and most every town had a compost facility. And unfortunately, the compost facilities became like landfills. Everybody just dumped everything in these things, and it was a mess. And they stunk, and they had leachate. They were horribly sited. They were right next to rivers, streams. We had a couple hovering over the ocean on cliffs. It was crazy. And because of that, DEP wrote super stringent regulations. And we closed all those facilities. And that was okay because they weren't very good facilities. But the point is, it was for today's environment, it's almost overregulation. You almost can't do anything. And the greatest example is a community garden. You know, like a vision I have is every urban center in New Jersey should have community gardens. Philadelphia just went through an RFP process where they cited like 18 community gardens all around the city. And people from the neighborhood should be able to bring appropriate stuff that's allowed to that facility to drive it away from landfills. In New Jersey, to apply for a community garden, it's $10,000. What nonprofit organization in the community is $10,000? The operating fees, the annual fees, and the compliance fees, $17,000 a year. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So we have to fix this stuff. So the Composting Council did a petition for community gardens. DEP listened, and they actually are developing a number of additional exemptions, one of which will be for community gardens. DEP, under the Recycling Enhancement Act, if you go back, if you remember, right, the recycling fund lapsed, and then we got it back in 10 years, and it's now the Recycling Enhancement Act. And there's a piece of that funding that goes to food and for colleges and universities. And I'm vice chair of Sustainable Jersey, and we applied for some of that money, and it's really good stuff. And we got a sizable grant in Sustainable Jersey from DEP to develop a kindergarten to 12 reduction best practices, food waste diversion and composting guidance document we're going to be putting together, fund 3 pilot programs. And I put on here Chatham because for me in Sustainable Jersey, Chatham is my poster child of operating a rocket composter at the high school for, I don't know what it is, 8-10 years. It's crazy. It's wonderful. It's sort of my vision of sustainability in schools, right? They have gardens, they grow stuff, they grow produce, they cook it, they serve it to the kids, and then they use a composter to put it back in the soil. Bingo. That's what sustainability is. It's awesome. So we have a pilot funding, and we're going to buy 3, I don't know if it's going to be rockets, it's going to be some technology to go in schools to do the same thing like at Chatham and to put together a comprehensive toolkit. I'm getting near the end. Recycling infrastructure, we do have some, and I want to mention it quickly. We have a major new food waste facility on Duck Island. So if you go down to Trenton and you go by the State House, you keep going down Route 29. It's like a dead end, and that's called Duck Island. And there's a 450 ton per day high technology composting facility that's operational. And towns can go there now and work through Sustainable Jersey with a lot of towns to try to get them to bring their material to Trenton Biogas. Waste management, put together what I consider one of the most exciting projects that we've ever had. And we kind of know this, we operate in our little silos. So the waste is, solid waste is a silo, recycling, sludge, septage, hazardous waste, they're all different little silos. This one kind of crosses the boundaries, which is exciting. Waste management took an old transfer station, they converted it to a Class C facility, and they basically run a big blender. It's called a macerator. They take source-separated food, they blend it up, they put it in a tanker truck, and they drive it to the Rahway Valley Sewage Authority, and they pump it into their existing capitalized, meaning paid for, secondary wastewater digester to maximize the use of that digester to create natural gas. It is an absolute win-win. We're not citing a overly complex food waste composting system. It's a blender, and the blender puts the stuff in a big tank that's already paid for and sitting there. And we're making clean, recoverable natural gas. So it's really a great project. It's 500 tons per day. It's a large size. And personally, I'd like to see every wastewater facility in the state. And we have giants. We have Passaic Valley Sewage Commissioners, the 4th largest wastewater treatment plant in the United States of America. Middlesex County, Bergen County Utilities Authority. I'd love to see them all look at this. If you have excess capacity in the digester or this can work, it could be a great thing. Organic diversion, permitted a 200 ton per day facility in Gloucester City, Camden County. They haven't built it yet. Hopefully they will. If you want to see a facility, if you're into this, go to Kane University. They built a pilot project. It's the coolest thing you're ever going to see. They built it in the middle of all the dorms, And Kane has like 15, 16,000 students. So it's like a small New Jersey town. And they built the digester. It's an aerobic digester in a greenhouse right in the middle of the campus. So it's got total transparency. And if it's going to stink, the kids are going to go crazy. And the point is, it doesn't stink. It runs really well. And in 5 days, this thing produces the most drop-dead gorgeous soil amendment you'll ever see. I stood there when it came out and I stuck my hands in there. I was like, wow, this is awesome. It's not a compost. Doesn't meet 503 standards for pathogens, pathogen reduction, but it's a soil amendment, and they use it all around Kane University, and it's fantastic. The Kane digester spun off into a private company, which is called Four Solutions, and they've sold some of these things, and they sold a pretty significant one to Princeton University, which has it up and operating. And finally, we have one outdoor windrow composting project in Sussex County up in Andover Ag Choice. A guy named Jay Fisher. It's very small, but he does it right. And it kind of shows us that you can do outdoor windrow composting right. He's fully capitalized. He's got great equipment. He's got no violations from DEP. He's operated for like 7 years. And, again, it's small, but, the more the merrier. The more facilities we could get, the better. And the last thing I'll close with is I'm working, Bayshore allows me to work with a bunch of organizations. I can sit on a bunch of boards. And we put together an organics white paper. And if anybody is interested after this, if you're really into the food issue, just drop me a note through Larry or Liz, and I'll send you a copy of this thing. And it's, I'm co-chair of the New Jersey Climate Change Alliance, and it's a total volunteer nonprofit organization to focus on climate change and help DEP with climate change. And 15% roughly of greenhouse gas comes from landfill methane. So the more material we can drive away from landfills into collection technologies and others that don't release the methane, the better. So the Climate Initiative, ANGER, the Composting Council, and Sustainable Jersey will get together to try to address the kind of things I mentioned with community gardens, to try to work with DEP to rewrite regulations, change policies, and really drive organic management. And the whole point of this is to put together for the state a sustainable organic material management plan. So I probably hit or exceeded my time, as I always do. But that's what I wanted to present, and I'd really be happy to answer any questions if we have any.
Thank you so much, Gary. I don't see any questions, but I just have a general question with regard to recycling, and specifically with curbside recycling. We are very much try to encourage proper recycling through guidelines and education. And I'm just wondering if you could just kind of go off of that and let us know how important it is to only put acceptable items out to the curb for recycling, because as Eric talked about, it's just so many problems and things that can go wrong when we don't follow the guidelines.
Yep. And boy, you hit it on the head, Liz. The whole state, from DEP on down, has developed recycle right campaigns, right to your point. And, from DEP, Steve Rinaldi always puts out the Facebook and Instagram posts on do this, recycle this, don't recycle that. I have one of your bags that you developed in Morris County, which is absolutely phenomenal. And it says, this is what you recycle, this is what you don't recycle. Sussex County put together magnets, which I thought was a great one, refrigerator magnets that they give out that just 2 simple columns. This goes in the bucket, this doesn't go in the bucket. Bayshore, as the group may know, runs 1,000 ton per day Class A. I can't even put into words what we get. We could open a sports store with all the sports equipment that we get, bats, balls, gloves, hockey sticks, masks, you name it. Garden hoses, or just for some reason, everybody thinks garden hoses are recyclable. And then bad stuff. The first 2 weeks we were operating, our ops manager came in, 2 large craft bags full of needles and syringes on my desk. And, these are not, these are at-home diabetics. They're not being malicious, but they look at the thing and they say, okay, the needle is part metal, part plastic, it's got to be recyclable, and it's not. So, you know, the guidance across the board, and I really have to commend counties like Morris and Middlesex and many others who have developed these campaigns to get to address contamination. I mean, as Eric said, there's so much stuff in there, and we get both single stream and dual stream. So at Bayshore, we kind of see it both. And we really need to recycle what we can recycle. And just, we have to stop the wishful recycling, because it's such a waste of resources, and it can be hazardous and dangerous.
Yeah. Well, Gary, thank you so much for your presentation and for your efforts in opposing the diversion of the recycling funds, and for testifying on behalf of all of us. We certainly appreciate your efforts and your passion. Thank you so much.
Gary, if you don't mind, can I ask you a question on the food waste? Larry Gendorf here.
Sure.
Morris County MUA, we operate 2 large regional compost facilities for, you know, the leaves, grass, and brush. Do you see any way that the food waste regulations would allow a facility like that to do food waste composting and mix it in our what is now a high quality material? Or I'm thinking that's something I don't want to address and ruin my compost facility by moving food waste into it. Could you address that dichotomy, I guess?
Yeah. Is it possible? Yeah. The EP would be, I think, look at it very carefully. And the issue is the historic failures from outdoor facilities and odors. You know, the real issue is odors. You know, I think Jay Fisher up at Ag Choice has shown us that it can be done, but I think it's totally a function of the siting. And like he said, it truly, for New Jersey, it's rare to say this in the middle of nothing. You know,
Yep.
beautiful land, he's got no neighbors. So that would be the issue, I think, would be a siting issue. But he actually started, Larry, as a RD&D. So he was a research and development project that the DEP supported. And again, he's done it for 7 years, but again, it's small scale.
Yeah, we're pretty familiar with Jay and his program. As a matter of fact, he kind of made a move to see if he could take over our facilities probably 5-6 years ago. And,
Oh, is that right? Interesting.
yeah, it was. So, yeah, I know he does it well, and he's got a lot of hands-on work it takes to get that process to work for him. Like he covers his piles with a netting or some sort of covering to help it facilitate the process. So I know for that sort of facility, it's tight. Let me ask you a question. For a facility like that, that is tiny, that may be one that exists, how do you see that small allocation of capacity being divided up amongst everyone who's going to be required to go there?
Yeah, and that's a really great question. And language was actually put in the legislation that empowers the facility to agree to accept it. So if they're at capacity, then they would be fully within the letter of the law to say, I'm sorry, I can't take you. And that's sort of like a reality kind of a thing. So you can do that. And exemptions were put in for any type of on-site activity. So if somebody is doing backyard composting, the community garden thing, any of that is exempt. I mean, nothing was put in here to stop good stuff that's already happening, you know, and I'd really love to see the state push the utilities authorities that have the sewage, secondary wastewater digesters to at least analyze that possibility. Man, that could be such a big win-win, and take entire counties worth of material by sending it just a big blender, you know, which is very doable. And I think the final word, from my experience, smaller works best. The problem with large food waste facilities is you have this pressure. It's so big and it costs so much money that you have a lot of pressure to drive material through that, and that violates nature. I mean, even with our best technology, you can only compost stuff to meet federal 503C pathogen reduction requirements so fast. And you wind up, you know, like they're not like facilities like the waste incinerators, the garbage resource recovery plants, they have 3 processing lines. So you only operate 2, you always have 1 down to have maintenance. That's not how the food waste facilities work. There's generally only 1 processing line. So if you have any problem with that processing line, the facility goes down. And then, what's sitting on a tipping floor? It stinks. And, it causes problems. So the smaller things, I think, are hopefully our answer. And then on the big side, I really hope the wastewater treatment plants can play a big role.
And finally, this is always my kick on how we get recycling tonnage credits and things like that we are getting our tonnage grants back, as we hear, hopefully today. Issues like when you go to the waste management sewer macerator, is New Jersey going to look at that as recycling or not?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yes, I believe that is how they've interpreted the facility to count, because it is. I mean, there's no question about it. And you're right. It's an interesting question because, again, it's crossing silos. You're actually processing the material in a wastewater facility, which historically has not been part of the, quote unquote solid waste stream. It's been sort of regulated differently. But yeah, I'm quite sure that is the case.
Okay.
Good question.
Okay, that's all I have. And once again, like Liz says, I really appreciate you making that presentation, as well as Eric Gabrielson and Liz and Deirdre from our office. So
Yes.
Wonderful job, Gary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My pleasure for sure. Anytime.
So I would just like to thank everyone for attending. If you are joining us by phone, please send us an email and type in the phone number in the body of the email so we can match up your name, and that way we'll know exactly who attended. I know it's been a really challenging year for everyone. If you have any questions about credits, CRP status, please reach out to Carol Broccoli. Today's meeting, once again, will count as 1.5 classroom credits, and it does meet the MTG requirement. We've been sending out emails and will continue to do so about webinars. Andrew is actually offering a lot of really great webinars coming up. If you have any questions about that, please feel free to either reach out to us. We've also sent an email about that. And once again, I'd just like to thank our guest speakers, Eric and Gary. Thank you so much. It was great to have you. A lot of great information today. And just want to thank everyone for joining us, and stay safe and be well. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me or anyone here at the MUA. I believe we are going to get Gary's white paper up on our website, and we're probably going to send a follow-up email.
Yeah, I anticipate that we'll be able to make a recording of this and post it on our YouTube channel, which I suggest everyone subscribe to, and look at some of our new videos that we're going to have posted up there. And I'll probably make just a dedicated page for this sort of meeting with the information, the agenda, as well as a video of it, so we could do that moving forward.
Okay,
so I think we'll get those posted under the Municipal Recycling Coordinators web page on the mcmua.com website.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Larry, and thank you, Deirdre and MUA staff, for putting this meeting together. And as I mentioned before, stay safe and be well and enjoy this beautiful first day of autumn. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.